Can you put that on to the, on the far left side? Far left.
Okay.
The other left.
Oh, right, because he's taking away. That's an reduction. Maybe that's why. Well, they just didn't understand. So we get money in and we spend some. So the difference is a combination of the revenue that comes in and what we're budgeting. We eventually got to that point. Okay. And then we were like, oh, okay. But it wasn't.
Good evening, everyone. We're grateful to have you with us tonight for tonight's City Council meeting. Your presence and participation help shape our community. For the record, today is July 3rd, 2025, and the time is 6:30 p.m. I'll begin with the roll call. So, Council, when I call your name, please say here or present. Mayor Maxton?
Here.
Councilmember Stroop?
Here.
Roden?
Here.
Olvera?
Here.
Pearson?
Here.
Parker?
Here.
And Swarig.
Here.
With 7 members of council present, a quorum is declared.
Thank you, Christina. And would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good turnout tonight. That sounded really good. On the eve of the 4th of July. So, yeah. As a reminder to everybody, our meeting is live broadcast tonight. Would like to welcome everybody that's joining us here in the council meeting, and also welcome to all those that are joining us as part of the live broadcast. For those that are here in the meeting room with us, I'd ask that if any comments are being made as part of the meeting or during the meeting, that all comments be made from the podium that's up here with the microphone. And the reason for that is if you make comments from your seat, those that are watching by live broadcast cannot hear the comments. So please, we'll get into points and people want to make comments from the seat. Just pop up, get to the microphone, and make a comment then. If you do get an opportunity to speak, I'd ask that you introduce yourself. If you're a resident, please state if you're a resident of Fair Oaks Ranch or not, your name, and then whether you're a resident or not, and if you're here with an agency, what agency that you're here from. And with that, we'll move on to our citizens to be heard tonight. And as a reminder, in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, council may not discuss or take action on any item which has not been posted on the agenda. And then I ask all speakers that did sign up if you'd limit your comments to 5 minutes. We had 2 individuals sign up, and Ms. Willoughby, you were signed up first.
I'm Carol Willoughby. I live here in Fair Oaks Ranch in the Chartwell area, and it's good to see you all again. I hope you have a great 4th of July. It's great that it's on a Friday and we can all enjoy it. Really kind of surprised everybody's here, huh? I wanted to talk to you and address 65 and older exemption that the city provides to the citizens. When the city was formed in 1988, that seems like forever ago. I'm sure some of you were not even born then. There was given to all over 65 citizens a $20,000 tax exemption. And it wasn't until 34 years later, in 2022, that it was bumped up to $50,000. And thank you, City Council, the mayor, and the powers that be that were here at that time that did that. Being a realtor for the past 20 years in Fair Oaks Ranch, Bernie, San Antonio, surrounding areas, I have seen our beautiful Texas Hill Country population explode, which means that the market prices of all the homes has increased dramatically. Therefore, the assessed value has increased, and that's what all our exemptions are based off of, is the assessed value. My husband and I will be turning 65 within the next 6 months or so. And so now we're going to fall into the same category as along with 1,500 people in Fair Oaks Ranch that are of that age or older. And we'll be eligible for that 65 property tax exemption. With Bexar County and BISD freezing our current property taxes, the county taxes and the school taxes, it's obvious the 65 and older population in Fair Oaks Ranch are looking to keep the city property tax exemption relevant. Even the city of Bernie has frozen their city taxes. I didn't know that till last week when I called and asked. I just was trying to take a poll of different communities around us. It's obvious, let's see. I spoke with their financial director last week, and she was excited. Bernie has this in place to attract more retirees to their community, which I know we'd like to do also. In 2022, the $50,000 exemption percentage for a property, a market value at $600,000, that's the average home price at this time in Fair Oaks Ranch, was at 8.1%. That was our tax exemption percentage for 65 and older. In 2023, that same exemption percentage dropped to 7.4. In 2024, it dropped again to 6.8. Can you see the math? Do you see how the value of the exemption to the limited income homeowner, that would be people that are retired, trying to survive on Social Security and whatever, could eventually become almost worthless? Could it rival what the county taxes are valued at? Can you understand that the exemption percentage should mirror the same value in 2025 that it did in 2022 when y'all raised it to 50,000? Can you understand that we need to honor our aging population in Fair Oaks Ranch and remember that our roots as a community that was primarily started for retired folks, a large percentage of them were then, back in the late 1970s and the early 1980s. And it has become much more through time. But let's not forget that the value in an over 65-year-old population, what it has had in Fair Oaks Ranch's past and still does to enrich our present and our future. These people are we're a lot of volunteers that are over 65. We volunteer not only up at the school, we volunteer in our community, volunteer at our churches. So we're still working, even though we've got that over 65 exemption, we're still working to improve our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for your comments and being here tonight. The second individual that signed up is Mr. Steve Brown. And while you're up, can we get a weather update for tomorrow?
I'll tell you, I actually shaved because I knew I was going to be on TV. Where's the makeup? Actually, tonight we do have a chance of seeing a rain bomb go off somewhere between here and Rock Springs. I don't know exactly where, but when they go off, they are ferocious, as you know. Anyway, I'm here to talk about a project I dubbed Project Forward, which is Fair Oaks Ranch Water and Rainwater Development. A secure and consistent water supply is crucial for our community. Now, we've been blessed with access to Canyon Lake water That's thanks to the foresight of Boots Gobbets, our late mayor, and the previous city councils, and we thank them. However, we've been in a 5-year drought that has left Canyon Lake at its lowest level since it first filled back in the 1960s. Right now, it's never been lower. Our allocation is being cut. Some development projects in Comal County have had to be canceled due to insufficient supply from Canyon Lake. The rest of our water comes from the fragile Trinity Aquifer wells, which is not ideal. They are fragile. A few Fair Oaks residents get their water from saws, and that's a very few, but even the mighty saws is struggling to find new water resources as our entire region experiences drought and explosive growth. I think we have an excellent opportunity right now. We have access to MDD funds, and we could direct those assets toward a water infrastructure project that will help us with our future water security with no additional taxes from our residents, not one dime, if we can get a handle on that MDD money. The project has to conform with MDD rules, but according to our research, similar projects have already been set up in other communities across our state, so this is nothing new. What else is not new is rainwater harvesting. Project Forward could be set up to assist all of our residents with a portional financing plan for an appropriate rainwater collection system designed for their property. There are numerous rainwater harvesting companies already operating in our area. We have Danny Aldretti here tonight. He actually works at Tanks a lot, and I thank you a lot for coming here. And you know, it could be a project that ranges from landscape watering for your lawn or garden, or it could be potable drinking water for your entire house. That's going to be the most expensive, you know, a small project, the least expensive. But it would be nice if we could use MDD funding to help with these projects. Some stats here. Our normal rainfall is 32 inches. The average Fair Oaks home's roof is 2,500 square feet. An average roof in a normal year receives 50,000 gallons of rainwater. That's a lot. If you collect only 20% of that rainwater, you can still fill an average-sized swimming pool. If a roof is covered with solar panels, you can still collect 100% of the rainwater that falls on that roof. Solar and rain are totally compatible. Now, even in drought years, we still get rain. Our highest drought years, or lowest, depending on how you look at it, we get about 33% of our normal rain. So if you were collecting on your roof that average home, you'd still be collecting 17,000 gallons in a drought year, the worst drought year. And that's still a lot of water. I've talked with a rainwater harvesting guy that was pretty famous in our area. His name is John Kite, did it up in Kerrville, had a whole household system. Spoke with him this week, and he told me that he was responsible for writing legislation in Texas that says any rain that falls on your property is your rain. It's your water. No one can take it away from you. Now, the water that goes into the ground is a different deal. Like, I can't drill a well at my house, but I can collect the rainwater, and you can't take it away from me. So it's mine to do with what I want. So I think if the city were to fund some of these projects, I'm sure very few people would take advantage of it, you know, right off the bat, but there'd be some. And then as time goes on, I think more and more people would say, hey, I don't want to do that. You know, my lawn watering bill is atrocious. That's all I have to say.
Thank you,
You
sir.
want to say anything? I probably only have a minute left, Danny, but.
Go ahead.
I'll take your last minute.
Okay.
That's okay. Yeah, not a sales pitch, anything like that. As Steve was saying, you know, rainwater is very.
Your name?
Oh, I beg your pardon, sir. My name's Danny Aldretti. I live in San Antonio. I work at Tanks a Lot in Bernie. It's a family-owned business. My sister and brother-in-law own that company there. Been in business for 12 years. and we sell water tanks, lots of water tanks, and a lot of them are for rain harvesting, among other things. I'll just give a couple of quick facts. Every 1,000 square feet of roof you have can gather about 620 gallons on a 1-inch rain. Rain is naturally soft. People love it for their hair if you take it in-house. It's not very difficult to make it potable water, either through UV systems or through nanofilters like they use on the space station. And quite a resource, because it is going to rain. We're in the middle of a 5-year drought, and we're probably still going to get 20 inches of rain this year, even though we should be getting more like 30 or 32 on average. Tanks nowadays are available in a couple of different styles. They're polyethylene tanks or metal tanks with liners is what we sell, both of those. Different sizes, different shapes. They are very long lasting. The metal tanks we sell are 40+ year tanks. Anything anyone purchases in Texas for rain harvesting is exempt from sales tax as well. Not everybody's really aware of that. So if you spend, $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 on a rain harvesting system, increases your property value, but doesn't increase your ad valorem taxes, and there's no sales tax on it either. So with that, we'd be very excited about helping with any kind of initiative y'all may have here in the city, as Mr. Brown was talking about. We're right up the road, and we'll be there. I thank you for your time.
Thanks, sir. Well, Mr. Brown and Ms. Willoughby were the only two individuals that we had signed up as part of Citizens to be Heard. Is there anybody else here tonight that didn't get an opportunity to sign up that would like to speak? All right, we'll move on. We have one presentation tonight, special presentation, and I'll turn it over to Chief.
Yeah, tonight we have the highly anticipated introduction of our new canine, and his name is Vox. And see if we can put his picture up on the board there. Vox is a 2.5-year-old German short-haired pointer. He was obtained from the TSA canine training program for explosive detection, and he was working the airports. And he made it to 111 days. And so when we reached out to our partners at TSA and we said, we're looking for a new dog, we're retiring our canine, I said something that could provide not only emotional support, but also community engagement. Somewhere, we want a dog that we can take anywhere and not be concerned. Kids, the school, somebody that perhaps just lost a pet recently, to be able to spend time with that resident. And when he told me that he lasted 111 days and then failed out, I felt like he and I had a lot in common, because there's no way that I could sniff 2,000 dirty suitcases every single day at the airport. So Officer Magnus and I went out to Lackland and talked to TSA and looked at a few dogs and their kennel operation, and we instantly fell in love with Vox. So if you see Vox out and about, know that he's going to be getting lots of community engagement hours in. At the same time, we're hoping that he will become an amazing search and rescue dog for us. Anytime we have somebody that wanders off from home, no matter what part of the spectrum and age, we know that folks tend to wander off from time to time. Children tend to wander off from time to time, and hopefully he can be instrumental in finding a safe return for those folks. So welcome, Vox.
Hey. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
No.
And I'm sure everybody's aware that within the last 2 months, Buddy retired.
Yes.
He was over 10 years old, and so that's what drove looking for a new community engagement partner.
Exactly.
And really, I think Vox has already been over to the grade school a couple times. And he just loves the kids and has a great time with them, so.
That's why he's got a leash.
Thanks, Chief.
Very good. Thank you all.
With that, we'll move on to the agenda for tonight. First, we'll do the consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda tonight. First is the approval of the June 19th, 2025 regular city council meeting minutes. Second, approval of the second reading of an ordinance of the city council of the city of Fair Oaks Ranch, Texas, providing for the extension of the Fair Oaks Ranch city limits by the annexation of about 344.6 acre tract of land within Comell and Kendall County, Texas, generally located south and west of Ammon Road and east of the Stone Creek subdivision, and providing for an effective date. And third, approval of a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with M5 Utilities LLC for the Rolling Acres Trail and Willow Wind Redbud Hill Waterline Replacement Project, expenditure of the required funds, and execution of all applicable documents by the city manager. Are there any council members that would like to remove any of these items from consent to consideration? With that, could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
From Keith, and a second?
Second.
From Dale. All in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. And next, we're going to move on to the reconvening of the public hearing from our last council meeting, which was on June 19, 2025, concerning the creation of the Post Oak Public Improvement District pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 372 of the Texas Local Government Code. And Christina, I have the time now is 6:49, and we are reconvening the public hearing. And any further explanation, Jim, or you just turn it over to you?
I'll do a quick refresh for folks who may not know what's going on right now. And just for the record, as we hopefully wrap up the public hearing. So on June, I can't believe I'm saying June 19th, we started the public hearing process for the Post Oak Development Public Improvement District. It was advised, because the Attorney General will review this process, that we keep the public hearing open into a second meeting. So at the first public hearing, we basically did a summary of what the petition was for the development. In general, the subject property is the reserve at Fair Oaks Ranch. 2013, had a development agreement. It was amended in 2014. We have a new plan now, 278 residential units across 345 acres. The development agreement has Ammon Road improvements, PID financing for improvements, and annexation. Bunch of stuff going on with this development. Zip through this part. We did the class last week. So what's coming up next on the agenda is, if the council chooses to close the public hearing, they'll take up the resolution to create the Post Oak PID. We're anticipating both those actions tonight. Part two there is we'll have to make findings, and that's in the packet. I have draft findings prepared based on testimony at the public hearing, which so far there was none, and we've received no comments at the staff level. So I'll go through those findings at the next agenda item. I'm happy to take any questions going forward.
And we did not have anybody sign up to speak as part of the public hearing tonight. Is there anybody that didn't get an opportunity to sign up that would like to speak? All right. Christine, I have the time now is 6:51, and I'm closing the public hearing. And for council, if you have any questions, now would be the time to ask. All right. Then we'll move on to our consideration items for tonight. Are we good on the public hearing? Everything?
We're compliant, sir. Thank you. Yeah, we're good.
The first consideration item tonight is the consideration and possible action approving a resolution authorizing and creating the Post Oak Development Public Improvement District. And Jim, anything else we need to add to this?
Yes, sir. I'll run through the resolution real quick that creates the district. For everybody in the audience, Mayor, Council, thank you for tonight. I'm Jim Williams, Assistant City Manager. Tonight we'll go over the resolution that creates the actual improvement district. And so real quick, the decision has three parts. One is to make the findings of fact related to the petition and what's required in Texas Local Government Code 372, Chapter 372. The resolution also creates the district. It actually sets it up by boundary. And then we also added in an authorization to dissolve the district if, for whatever reason, the district we didn't get the work done, or it took too long, or wasn't necessary anymore. There was an authorization to dissolve the district as part of this resolution. Quick timeline review. We got the PID petition on May 2nd. We knew it was coming, but we got the actual petition on that date. We went to the next council meeting on May 20th. I think it was a special meeting. We accepted the petition, ordered the public hearing, and then we moved to the public hearing on June 19th. And here we are today to hopefully accept create the district. Real quick refresher. Most folks saw this on the last slide, but just for the record, it's the old reserve. The old development agreement was for the reserve at Fair Oaks Ranch in the northern part of the city. It's a redo of the old 2014 agreement, new residential units, some improvements on the road, and PID financing for improvements, plus an annexation. So the findings piece is what I'll read into the record. I won't read the whole thing because it's several pages. I'll just do a summary real quick, just for the record and for the listening audience. So the PID findings cover 6 categories that are required in statute, and I'll just briefly run over them. One of the first category is advisability, and the finding is that it's advisable and desirable and in the best interest of the city of Fair Oaks Ranch to create the Post Oak Development District. The second finding is that generally around the nature of the improvements and the general nature of the proposed public improvements to be provided by the district that are necessary for the development of the property within the district include, but it's not limited to, landscaping, lighting, fountain signs, construction of streets, sidewalks, construction of water utility systems, payment of expenses incurred in the establishment or operation of the administration and financing of the public improvements. The third criteria is estimated cost of improvements, and the estimated authorized costs, including bond issuance costs, legal and financial fees, administrative cost is $60 million. The city will pay none of the costs for these improvements and other than the district assessment. So funds will come out of that to pay for it. The boundaries of the district are exactly per the meets and bounds description of the annexation. So that's in attachment B of the document. I won't go through all those numbers and letters. The method of assessment will be that the city will levy assessments on each parcel within the district in a manner that results in equal shares of the costs on properties similarly benefited. All assessments may be paid in full at any time, and certain assessments may be paid in annual installments. Either way, the installments will be paid in amounts necessary to meet the annual costs for the authorized improvements financed by the assessments, and must continue for a period of time necessary to retire the indebtedness of the authorized improvements, including the interest. So the sixth finding is the apportionment of costs between the district and the city. And the finding basically says that the city will not be obligated to provide any funds to finance the authorized improvements other than the assessments levied on the district. So with that, the recommendation from staff is first off to authorize and create the Post Oak Development District. And then the second recommendation is to adopt the findings of fact as outlined in the resolution and in the cover letter, and then authorize the district dissolution agreement. That concludes my staff report. I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions from council? Good. And Jim, one quick question. So in the creation of the PID, although city council is involved in, as part of the city operations, we are in no way responsible for the money that's borrowed, or this would tie the city to repay back any portion of this?
No, the PID will pay every cost that they incur, from their improvements to staff time on finance. They'll pay the whole cost. Yep.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else here that has any questions? And with that, could I get a motion to approve a resolution authorizing and creating the Post Oak Development Public Improvement District?
So moved.
Jonathan, and a second.
Second.
From Ruben. Any further discussion from council? With the motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Excuse me, Mayor, who seconded?
Ruben? Motion is approved. Thank you, Jim.
A pleasure.
And with that, we'll move on to our second consideration item tonight, which is the consideration and possible action approving the first reading of an ordinance amending the City of Fair Oaks Ranch Code of Ordinances, Chapter 9 Personnel, Article 9.03, Police Department, and this is in Section 9.03.004, Chief of Police. And you want to give us a lead in on this?
Happy to do that, sir. Good,
All right.
good evening again, Jim Williams, Assistant City Manager. So tonight, what we're presenting is, if you're familiar with, we just went through a very large personnel policies update. This is one of those cleanup items that we discovered in that process. Tonight, we're presenting a first reading of an ordinance that updates Section 9.03.004 of the city's code. Excuse me. This is a proposed code cleanup that more closely aligns with the city's current practice and the city's current form of government. Since the adoption of the Home Rule Charter in 2017, the city has operated under the council manager form of government, where the city manager, not the mayor anymore, has the authority to appoint, suspend, or remove employees, which includes the chief of police. This amendment removes outdated language requiring mayoral appointment and council confirmation and brings the city code into alignment with the charter and current practice. All of the language in this section would remain unchanged. This proposed change supports our strategic action plan goal of operational excellence. Staff recommends approval of this first reading, and I'm available for any questions.
Pretty simple.
Straightforward. Yeah.
Should have been changed when we adopted the Home Rule Charter, but
Well,
we just missed it.
Things move fast.
Right.
Yeah, we'll catch up.
All right. Any questions from anyone here tonight? Then with that, can I get a motion to approve the first reading of an ordinance amending the City of Fair Oaks Ranch Code of Ordinances, Chapter 9 Personnel,
So moved.
Article 9.03, Policy Department, Section 9.03004, Chief of Police. And Scott?
Second.
Any further discussion from council? Motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. And thank you again, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the Jim Williams show tonight, or?
One more, sir. I have one more. Happy to do it.
Third consideration item is the consideration and possible action approving the first reading of an ordinance approving a first amendment to the 2024 franchise agreement with Frontier Texas Ventures LLC for the collection, hauling, and disposal of municipal solid waste and recyclable materials in the City of Fair Oaks Ranch. And I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
All right. Yes, sir. Jim Williams, Assistant City Manager. And I also have with me Chris Cox from Frontier Waste. And it looks like you brought some staff members with them. Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right, sir. Again, this is, I would say, no pun intended, another cleanup. Just so, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so as council knows and residents know, we began services with Frontier Waste in October of 2024. Recently, Ms. Van Zant and I became aware of some confusing terms in the franchise agreement regarding the scheduling of bulk and brush pickup. Before you is a first reading of an ordinance to correct this issue. So here's the problem. Currently, residents are required to contact Frontier Waste by the end of the business day prior to their scheduled collection day. This leads to some confusion because residents really don't know what their scheduled brush or bulk collection day is. They think it's their regular trash pickup. So they won't know what their scheduled day is until they actually call Frontier. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of thing. So this eventually results in residents calling for a pickup to find Frontier Waste having no capacity because they're expecting it to happen the next day and they end up not having capacity, and then folks have their expectations unmet and we have to work that out. So what we propose right now is to address this issue is that we propose a contract amendment. Mr. Cox and I have tentatively agreed to that, run it by the city manager's office. And the proposed solution is real simple. It requires residents just contact Frontier Waste no later than 5 p.m. on the Friday before the last week of each month, which that last week is the designated bulk and pickup brush and pickup week. And that's gonna allow Frontier Waste and the resident to collectively schedule a time and appointment and hopefully not have any confusion or unmet expectations. So it's a pretty simple contract amendment, and because this was, the franchise agreement was adopted by ordinance, we have to amend it by ordinance. That's why it's before you tonight. This amendment aims to improve communication and service delivery for bulk and brush pickups. It aligns with the city's strategic action plan for operational excellence. This modification will clarify scheduling procedures, reduce confusion, and enhance resident satisfaction. All provisions of the 2024 franchise agreement are proposed to remain unchanged. And that concludes my staff report. I'm happy to take questions.
Jim, I think this all came about because, well, spring cleaning in the end of the month of June, was it?
It's May. We got a lot of phone calls. We're like, what is going on?
And it wasn't clear.
Yep.
And I think we had 255 pickups scheduled for that week.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, Frontier had to schedule, they needed to schedule assets to cover the city during that time period.
Right.
And so fully understandable that we need to give them time to do this. And then with that, do we have a plan of communications plan, how we're gonna?
We do. We've already started rolling some of that out. We've already started getting folks to call ahead, and then Frontier's starting to work that into their schedules. We just need to solidify that in the contract agreement.
Okay.
Yep.
Just curious, has this issue or confusion happened between them and any other cities, and was this the offered solution?
I'll have to defer to Mr. Cox.
Councilmember, so everybody, I'm Chris Cox. I'm the municipal market manager for Frontier Waste Solutions, and yes, I did bring some associates with me. We're on our way up I-10 for the weekend, so figured to let them watch a little bit of council meeting tonight as well. So thank you for your patience. As far as I know, and I've been in the industry with another trash provider for over 10 years, and since coming on to Frontier, as far as I know with Frontier, over my term, and then also being a competitor of theirs, I have not seen this issue before. So I think this is just an oversight on the negotiation and the written contract itself versus what operationally we do on the back end. But it's in there. We want to make sure we clear it up and make sure that we're able to communicate hand in hand to the residents what we're going to do moving forward. So we just want to clarify any confusion moving forward.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I just want to commend Chris and his team's ability to respond quickly, collaboratively. We worked it out pretty quick. We just now have to go to council to get it fixed. So, and here we are.
Hey, Jim, I know you mentioned you're getting a contract, but we're going to put something on our website, right?
We already do. We'll put some more messaging out as
Okay.
when this is finally inked. We'll just kind of solidify that and put some more stuff out and just start getting folks into the habit of making that Friday before that last week call.
Yeah, just make
Work on
sure
that.
we post it to Facebook,
Yes,
whatever
sir.
else, next door,
Yep,
whatever social channels we have. Yeah.
we'll make it happen.
Anybody else? Any questions from anyone here tonight? With that, can I get a motion to approve the first reading of an ordinance approving a First Amendment to the 2024 franchise agreement with Frontier Texas Ventures LLC for the collection, hauling, and disposal of municipal solid waste and recyclable materials in the city of Fair Oaks Ranch?
So move.
Ruben?
Second.
Scott? Any other comments from council? Motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. Thank you, Chris, for being here tonight and for the explanation. And thanks, Jim.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
we have one consideration item left. Our presenter is a little bit behind with traffic right now, so with the council's blessing, in order to keep the line moving, I respectfully request we move to the Vestal Park workshop and come back to the final consideration item, just so there's no delay.
Any objections? There you go. All right, so we'll move on to our workshop item, which is review of the Vestal Park culvert design options. So if you're tracking the packet, we're moving to page 300. And I believe the presentation's on page 302.
Sir?
Lee?
Take it away. Good evening, council members. I'll be presenting tonight, My name is Lee Winese, Manager of Engineering Services. I'll be presenting tonight to provide some design information and options regarding the Vestal Park culvert. Okay, let's get started by providing a bit of background information. The project is located on the south side of the city, just west of Pimlico and Rocking Horse Lane intersection. The project came about due to a 48-inch corrugated pipe showing signs of degradation, which was rusted out at the bottom. Staff worked with the general engineering consultant to develop preliminary solutions that include 3 options and their associated costs. So this is the heart and soul of the project, but I will try not to bore you to death, so I'll keep the information as simple as possible. The culvert is part of a tributary that drains within the Salado Creek watershed and is approximately 100 acres. The watershed produces 330 CFS, or cubic feet per second. San Antonio River Authority has created some draft hydraulic models which staff utilized and updated to analyze the tributary, demonstrating that there is approximately 1.22 feet of water overtopping the road during the 10-year storm event. So option 1 is the Bentley option, which is to replace the existing corrugated metal pipe with 2 6x4 concrete box culverts. This option would benefit by reducing the amount of water overtopping the road to 0.4 feet or 4.8 inches. And since the boxes are concrete, prevent the need for maintenance due to pipe degradation. The estimated cost is $548,000. So option 2 would replace the existing pipe with the same size pipe, but it will be concrete instead of corrugated metal pipe. This would not change the amount of water overtopping the road, but will benefit the crossing by, again, eliminating the need for maintenance due to pipe degradation. The cost of this project is $371,000, so slightly cheaper than the first option. The third option would be proposing to fix the pipe degradation with concrete patches, which is something that staff has done in the past. This option would not provide any change to the water overtopping the road and is considered a temporary fix, as it only fixes current pipe degradation. This option would be done in-house with minimal cost. So in summary, the first 2 options show benefits with future maintenance, with only the first option showing the relief in the water overtopping the road. Options 2 and 3 are the cheaper options, but at the cost of no reduction in water overtopping the road. Staff would like to recommend option 3, as it is the most cost-effective and would only require citizens a slight detour to Fair Oaks Parkway to the west when water overtops the road. Next steps for staff would be to finalize the design with the general engineering consultant and proceed to amend the current budget, which is $113,844 if options 1 or 2 are selected. This project is part of the fiscal year 25 drainage CIP budget. If option 3 is selected, then there would not be a need to consult with the general engineering consultant or conduct budget amendments, and staff would then mobilize to start the concrete patchwork. And with that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
The temporary fixes that we do, I know you said they've been done in the past. How long do they typically last?
We've done a few concrete patches, and I want to say some of these are like 4 to 5 years, and they haven't shown signs of any sort of degradation. So in the past, I've seen these patches last as long as the pipes can. It really just depends, because a lot of these corrugated metal pipes, they start to rust out. So as long as the water doesn't continually touch the pipes, the metal portions of the pipes, then they won't rust out, because concrete won't rust out. But again, it just depends on how much water is actually being touching the pipe.
Lee, in the last 10 years, how many times have we had water over the road, do we know?
To the record, we haven't had any sort of overtopping.
As far as we know, we've not ever had that.
As far as we know, as far back as history, staff have been asked.
I think it's had over 20 years.
Yeah,
that we knew
some
for sure.
some of the staff members have been here for a while, and they said they've never seen water overtop that road.
So what would be the logic in trying to make this option one if we've not seen that or don't expect it? Why would we make it that big?
From a safety standpoint, with modeling, hydrology and hydraulics, it could be based on the modeling. We could take a deeper dive into seeing what sort of how much water actually overtops. But from the information that we have and what we concluded with the modeling from Sarah and in-house design, the water would overtop the road. It also depends on how often, it could be over 20 years we haven't seen a rain event at that point, and that's why it's never overtopped. We just don't know. So the safety factor would be the main reason to do it, because anybody trying to cross that road during a rain event where it is overtopping, they're endangered.
Lee, when you were able to get into the pipe and look at it, was there oxidation there? As long as it's been there?
I know it's really hard to see, but that's what the pipe looked like in there. And it's really hard to see, but you could see because there's a constant water in the pipe, that's where you start seeing that degradation. Typically, with these corrugated metal pipes, they're usually dry. But since there are multiple ponds just upstream of this pipe, that's why the water is constantly in there, and that led to the degradation of the pipe. So there is some rusted out, which is dealing with oxidation in the pipe.
And the cover that you're talking about seals it up to the point where it's...
Correct. We would go to the wherever the rusting and degradation is, and replace that with concrete, so that it doesn't have that touching of the pipe to continue to rust out.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I got one for you, and I went over this with Grant a couple of months ago and probably should have asked then while it was all fresh. But you mentioned that we consult an engineering firm for this. Did we consult them as part of a larger look at all of our infrastructure and tell us what needs fixed? Or did somebody go out there and look at this and say, hey, let's call the engineers to come check this pipe out?
So this was on our drainage CIP for when it was first developed back in 2018. So it's been a known problem that there's been pipe degradation and also a large amount of flow going through this pipe. So it's been part of it. And then once staff preliminary looked at the analysis, which we gathered the hydrology and hydraulic models, we updated them, and then because the Sarah models didn't go all the way up to this crossing, they stopped way before, so we had to add the actual crossing to the models. And so once we developed all that, and then we went to the GEC, in which case they were able to look at it and kind of determine, okay, this is the kind of quantities and costs that is associated to fix this problem. Of course, when we updated it based on what is needed, which was two 6x4 box culverts, which would convey the 10-year storm, since this is only need to be designed to the 10-year storm, since it's a residential street.
So we did all the legwork on it and then took it to this engineering consultant and said, hey, look at this and see what you recommend?
Yes, sir.
And then
They-
what year did we go to the engineering consultant? Is that recently?
Yes, sir.
Just very recently?
Very
Do you know how
recent.
much we paid the engineering consultant to look at this for us?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it was minimal because this is a preliminary design. We would still need to go back to get actual quantities. And one of the things that we don't have right now is surveying. That's a big important part because that will drive how much actual quantities and a better design on what we have and what we need.
Well, if we move forward with option 3, we don't
We don't even do
need
that.
them again.
We won't even consult them
They
again.
got the one upfront money for looking at it and making the 3 options up. Right.
Yeah, well, actually, the engineering consultant only provided one option, and then staff provided the other options.
Okay, perfect. Which option did the engineering consultant?
The first
one?
option.
Okay. All right, and so, I mean, you can kind of see where I'm going with
Yes,
this,
sir.
right? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
And sorry I didn't ask this sooner.
Go ahead.
We've been talking a lot about drainage projects recently. Where would this fall in the hierarchy of all the other ones we're planning to do?
I don't have the exact hierarchy on this one. When I was reading the drainage CIP, it was one of the top three, other than I believe the Holt system was up there because of the flood waters, and then they also had the other one off of the other low water crossing. Usually low water crossings are the main source of concern. So it was definitely in the top 10.
Okay, and then is there a known risk for option 3 other than it just delays it or it's just temporary in nature?
The risk would be for option 3 is obviously the overtopping of the road, but you also run the risk of patching it and still the pipe degradation continue to happen, which could lead to a collapse in pipe, in which case it would, we would have to repair the whole street.
And has it ever been patched or worked on?
This pipe?
Yes.
No, sir.
Okay.
I guess that was my question, is the strength of the road on top of it. You know, understand the patching is on the bottom section of that, but how sturdy is the rest of it to withstand the traffic at this point? I mean, you have any concerns there? If we patched it, would you have any concerns about that collapse in the next X number of years?
I've seen pipes worse than this, and they've typically held up, and especially since this one has quite a bit of cover over the pipe. May or may not be, I'm no structural engineer, but I mean, there may or not be. And not to mention too, you would need a geotechnical report as well too, just to see the type of soils and everything. Just that all factors into the safety and the structural integrity of the pipe. But in my past jobs, I've seen pipes that don't even have a bottom, and they're still flowing.
What it's worth, man, I've probably laid 80 of these pipes and worked with some that have been around a lot longer than I have, and I've never seen one collapse. I mean, as long as the dirt is there, I mean, and something's kind of there holding the hole open, it's usually pretty solid.
And I guess one more question on this. We're talking about patching sections that are showing signs of degradation, rust, and wear, but would it make sense to do something broader to prevent any further degradation along the floor of the pipe? Have y'all thought about that?
We haven't really got into it because we did a bunch of preliminary design, but yeah, I mean, that's why we presented the 3 options. The patchwork is really like a temporary fix. A more permanent fix would be option 1 or 2. So that would be, anything further than that, yeah, you would definitely need option 1 or 2, other than the patch.
Really, the questions I had was related to the structural integrity of the pipe. And if we believe that integrity is still there and will be there after we put the concrete in and protect the pipe for a number of years, right now I believe it's the best option to move forward with.
All right. Thank you,
Any
Mayor.
questions from anyone here tonight? All right, so option 3.
3.
Well, Mr. Mayor, just to recap, with option 3, no council action is required, so staff will plan and continue to do that option in-house, and we will remove this project from the CIP.
News?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Ask a question, Mayor. What will we do with the budget that's been slated for this project? Will we just move it to another project that we have?
Yes, that's the short answer.
Okay.
Within drainage?
Yes,
Okay.
most likely.
All right. Thank you.
And we're going to go back to the consideration item now.
Yes.
Item number 12, which was the last consideration item that we had tonight, was the consideration and possible action approving a resolution establishing the target market position for the city's compensation plan. This one does have a presentation. It's on page 187 of the packet. And Joanna, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Joanna Merrill. I'm the Director of Human Resources and Communications. So as a part of the city's ongoing compensation and benefits study, we are bringing forward for your consideration 2 options regarding the currently recommended market position that's going to serve as the foundation for finalizing our updated compensation plan. So joining us this evening is going to be Carl Fuchs, our senior consultant with Evergreen Solutions, who has been leading the analysis of our benchmark data and helping to develop the models that we're presenting before you. Tonight's discussion will mainly focus on selecting the appropriate market placement at either the 50th or the 66th percentile for the city's pay ranges. These decisions will directly guide position alignment and implementation planning for future discussions in the fiscal year 2025-26 budget process. So at the conclusion of this discussion, staff respectfully requests that council take formal action to adopt the selected market placement by resolution. And with no further ado, I will turn over the mic and pointer to Mr. Carl.
Good evening again, Council. Carl Fuchs from Evergreen Solutions. So we're going to go over this evening, again, I'm going to recap some of the things that we've already gone through and then kind of project ahead as to what we're looking for through this consideration. And so, again, our goals are to review the internal equity of the organization, go to a market placement and conduct that survey that we've already done with those 20 peer organizations. From that, define what is a market equitable salary range for particular classifications within the organization, and then apply that to an updated salary structure for the City of Fair Oaks Ranch. So we've produced some recommendations on a preliminary basis, obviously, with this consideration item, kind of in limbo. And so what we're looking for is to identify what that competitive market position for the city is in relative to maintain that going forward. And so as these project phases lay out, we are kind of at a tipping point here between the end of phase 3 and the beginning of phase 4, where we'll generate some solution recommendations going forward. And so what that looks like is really where that internal equity piece and that external market equity piece kind of come together and allow us to see how those factors are going to impact individual employees and what that costing output's going to be as far as that investment into employee salaries going forward. So again, some of the methodology that we looked at when we went through the last consideration that I presented to you all as far as identifying who those market peers are. So to kind of rehash that again, we looked at, from a comparative standpoint, number of residents, number of employees in the organization, what the overall operating budget for those organizations are, total taxation rate, per capita income, and then some of the broader identity aspects of those particular organizations as well. So here's what those approved market peers again were, and what those particular metrics were as we made that we made those points earlier for your consideration a month or two ago. And so as we came back and got that data from those organizations, what we learned from those market peers are that, and so I'm showing you here what a 50th percentile and a 66th percentile of market look like. And so at the 50th percentile of market, at the midpoint, which I will focus on specifically just for the integrity of the data as it pertains to range width, within those, and I'll talk to that a little bit more here in a minute, but just to focus on the midpoint. So at the 50th percentile, currently the City of Fair Oaks Ranch on average, and again, this is structural, not necessarily individual employee salaries, is about 2.5% behind what that 50th percentile is. When we look at the 66th percentile of market, or the upper third of that market, what we're looking at is about a 6.5% or so decrement to what that market is showing us, where that lies. And so that negative differential again indicates a whatever that gap is between where the City of Fair Oaks Ranch is and what the average of the market peer responses were at a specific point in that market. And so those results, again, highlight, as you can see, that there's a further decrement at the minimum, and it tightens up a bit towards the maximum of the range. And so what that really indicates is the importance of looking at those range spreads as we have this conversation. And so as we looked at some of the average, or the average of the respondents were about 40% range width. And so what that's looking at is from what's the minimum salary for a position within an organization to the maximum salary. It's about a 40% increase. And the city of Fair Oaks Ranch is about 47.7%, or a little closer to 50%. And so that decrement is relevant as we look at those range spreads again. And so as indicated here on this graphic, when we look at a broader spread comparative to a narrow spread, we can see that there's differences in what those relationships are. And so again, for the integrity of the data more broadly, what we want to look at is that market midpoint as sort of our guiding beacon going forward. And so that's what our recommendations are predicated off of. So in the items that you have to look at, and in those particular exhibits in the report, you can see here that the overall market survey results are shown in 4C. The specific at the minimums are in 4D and E. At the midpoint, F and G, and at the maximums, we can see what is in H and I. And so looking at the market position at the 50th percentile, again, we identified those, and those were based on the approved market peers that we had been, that were codified in our last meeting. And so we look at those from a perspective to see kind of where we are, what that cost of that investment for those employee salaries going forward would look like from a range of options that I've shared that still need some refinement. So it's a very broad stroke of the brush. Vary somewhere between $130,000 upwards to about $770,000, depending on what sort of implementation methodology and what sort of compensation philosophy we want to move forward with. So when we look at the advantages here, we can talk about that it aligns Fair Oaks Ranch with the average of the comparative competitors in the market, in the labor economy that exists here, and also with comparative organizations that exist throughout the state of Texas. It is also aligned with what the stated project goals were, as indicated in the initial RFP that was provided to Evergreen that we bid on the outset of this project more broadly. Those approved market peers were pretty strategically picked, as we talked about, and again, the last time that we spoke. And so when we look at that from a comparative of what does that look like from the last endeavor that you all went through that was similar to this 6 or so years ago, as to what does it look like now, and why are the market peers relevant in that, is that we believe that those market peers are a more appropriate estimation as to what exists and what is in Fair Oaks Ranch's labor economy. And again, like we talked about, some of the specific data points that we got a little bit more granular with when we were making those recommendations. And so again, from that sort of demographic and fiscal profile, that it's a more representative list of market peers as we go forward. And then again, when we talk about sort of what's the sustainability of this investment over a long term, we want to ensure that this is something that, as we make these recommendations going forward, that it's sustainable and has some legs on it and some utility with it, so that it's an enduring solution to the problems that, or challenges that present themselves, to recruitment and retention at this point in time. Talk about some of the disadvantages is that it is a reduction from the city's prior benchmark target at the 66th percentile. So talking about the top third of the market. And so I'm going to kind of caveat that a little bit as I talk about that. And when I speak to the 50th percentile, what we're looking at there is a broad look at what those market peers provide. And again, in that Exhibit 4C that you can see, there's some classifications that are trailing the market, and there's some others that are already ahead of the market. And so what we're looking at when we assign the 50th percentile as our kind of guiding beacon is that we're going to achieve at a minimum the 50th percentile going forward. And so even though that is a decrement from what was stated previously as the 66th percentile market, just because that's what that's the bullseye of the target that we're shooting on, doesn't necessarily mean that as far as when we produce those recommendations going forward, that is in actuality where we are landing. We're landing in an area that's a bit more advantageous than the 50th percentile. And again, looking at that comparatively to that more strategic market peer classification group, it's a bit more representative of where we recommend that the city should be. And again, it's a more moderate salary adjustment. So when we're talking about what's the impact to the employees, it's a little bit more moderate, from that perspective. But again, as we look at what the stated goals of this particular project are, it's to provide market equity at a specific point of the market, not necessarily, draw a windfall for the employees of the organization. And so based on where we are, that's kind of the pros and cons here, looking at the 50th percentile of market. Now I've killed the clicker. I blame the rain. There we go. And so looking at the top third of the average of those market peers, again, identified and approved based on the city's immediate labor market and those comparative metrics. The estimated cost, as we're looking at the kind of range of implementation options at this particular market position, is somewhere between $240K and $1.05 million, depending on what sort of implementation methodology we land on. Again, that the caveat there is that there's obviously some refinement that needs to be done as we get those numbers together, but preliminarily, that's what we're looking at going forward. So the advantages is it positions the city above the market average of its peers, and so that's obviously advantageous to some degree, and that it enhances the competitiveness for talent and talent attraction and retention for your current employees. When we're looking at those disadvantages, there's obviously a larger investment that's being asked from a fiscal consideration going forward, and what are the return on those investments, and then of course the increased financial obligation in future years of maintaining this market position and maintaining this broader salary structure going forward. And so those are some of the drawbacks here again. And when I spoke a moment ago about what those return on investments are, again, we're talking about aiming at the 50th percentile of market, understanding that there's already classifications in the organization that exceed that in some cases by more than 10%. In other cases, there's a decrement of about 10 or so percent and greater. And so what we're doing is that we're aligning those things so that we're meeting at least the minimum of these particular market positions. So when I say that, I want to be very clear that the recommendations going forward don't mean that our recommendation is going to land at the 50th percentile of market or necessarily the 66th percentile of market. It's likely going to be more advantageous than that going forward. And that is all I have for you all this evening, but I'm sure I will be fielding some questions, so standing by.
Go ahead.
So I have a couple questions. Then what we're talking about here is the salary ranges.
That is correct, sir.
Correct. And as you stated, we're focusing on the midpoint as kind of our guiding marker. Help me understand on your slide of the 50%, since you just had it up there, the impact. You calculated an impact of, in this case, 130,000 to 770,000, and another impact at the higher level. Can you simply explain that, how you calculate that? Is that the impact to expanding the ranges, or what is that impact? What is that coming from?
Yes, sir. So that cost those numbers are based off of an estimated cost to the overall payroll of the city, based on 5 different implementation methodologies, which are yet to be determined. There's some refinement as to internal equity pieces, things like that are still very nascent in this project that we haven't necessarily refined. And in order to refine those further, I think that, in sort of the life cycle here, determining the market position sort of precedes those other metrics that we'd be looking at. But what those numbers are based off of are a variety of implementation methodologies and what those actual salary increases to your employees looks like more broadly against the current payroll structure.
So the impact would be, depending, like you say, on the type of the methodology that we use to implement it, the impact to our budget could range between these two numbers. Is not
That's
necessarily
correct.
the impact to the ranges, which I think is different, but this would be the potential impact to our budget.
That is correct, sir.
Per year.
So what that looks like going forward, right, is the implementation basically catches things up. What the output of that is year to year could vary depending on what that maintenance and the administration of that particular market position looks like over time. And some of that would probably be predicated by, something, a common marker is like a CPI metric or something like that. And what that looks like going forward is kind of difficult to forecast, especially in the situation that we're in right now. So I don't know, I don't think that's going to necessarily be an enduring increase to your budget at that level, but that's to catch things up. And then what you'd be looking at is a percentage of, that payroll, the budget of the payroll increasing from year to year.
I am curious as to why those ranges are so wide,
Which ranges, sir?
the impact range, the 130 to 770, the 240 to 1.05.
So those are, and this is again, I think I want to be very careful about kind of putting, forgive my term, but like putting the cart in front of the horse here. So there's a variety of methodologies that we provide as kind of baseline methodologies that we would look at to implement, and they have, similarly to what I've presented today, there's some advantages and disadvantages to each of those models going forward, and they look at different metrics from an employee perspective as to what or how we're going to essentially assign seats for employees within those pay ranges, and based on what those metrics look like, or how they sort of play out for employee salaries, is what delineates that that significant disparity in that investment cost.
Yes, I'm not much further along in understanding it, but thank you. I
So-
mean, I think the.
So there's some that are very fiscally
Yeah.
constrained,
Yeah.
that don't, if I'm being kind of candid. So there's some that are more fiscally constrained that they don't do anything but get folks into a new pay range. And so there's some other challenges that exist as far as the administration of those pay ranges and what they look like going forward. They don't answer that. There's some that are a lot more refined and are very specific to addressing all of, or the majority of, compression and movement through pay ranges, and those have a higher cost tag to them. And so that's basically what those things look like, without diving too far into that,
Okay,
into that hole.
okay.
So tonight, as we're looking at this, what you're really asking us to do is adopt the methodology that we would look at the 50th percentile. Is that?
The market position, yes, sir.
And so is that the first step that you need in the planning for the development? You mentioned that there are other decisions that have to be made as part of that.
Following, yes, sir.
Yeah, is that, so this would be the first, and then as we go along the process, there'll be other actions that will be brought back to council that will further refine and narrow that gap of 130 to 770?
It'll narrow it down to, as far as implementation methodology, as far as what that internal equity looks like from a staff perspective, there's going to be some inputs there as well. And so, yes, this is this is kind of the jump off point as we're moving forward to figure out, well, where are we going to land as far as the target for a market position to be able to move forward.
And ultimately, are we trying to get this resolved and this changes would be made for this year's budget?
That is the intent, yes. So to provide a brief path, the intention is providing the market position, which we're recommending at 50% in the resolution, the median of our newly adopted market, which is different than our old market, gives us the framework to go back and determine the implementation options that we'll bring back to you for the final pay plan. So with the adoption of the market, we can narrow it down to the final options. We can look at the implementation methods that Carl briefly described in terms of what our current budget plan is, and bring back our best recommendation for a pay plan that balances what we have in the budget and also takes into account employee tenure and position on the ranges. So we can keep those both in check. And that's how we arrive at an updated pay plan for your consideration. And yes, we plan to do that before the budget is adopted, as we conclude the budget workshop process.
Right?
When we were looking at like the 5-year forecast
Yes.
and those numbers, was any of this data sort of factored in there?
This specific data, no, but the 5-year plan that you adopt includes a composite 4.5% increase for salaries, and that's what we plan to consider as we give you an implementation plan.
Okay. 'Cause
So
I-
of that range that Carl mentioned, the 130 to the 770, the first, I don't want to throw a number because I might be wrong, but a portion of that is already embedded in the, if that makes, so it's not, it's a 130 on top of the budget, it's.
Yeah, because we had the 5-year forecast and we're sort of trying to manage that and look ahead, but then I didn't know if by doing this, it was going to sort of set all those numbers in a different direction.
That is not my intention.
Okay.
So, so the interest is to stay within or very close to at least to that adopted goal, and the difference would be rather than administer the steps on our old pay plan, we'll transition to the new pay plan within the budget that we have.
Okay.
Why are our ranges so wide and the market's not? I'm curious, as we're at 47%, the market's 38 or whatever it is. Is that just because that was the last, when we adopted the last plan, that was kind of the range that was set from that plan?
Yeah, there are some reasons for that. Carl and I have had wide-ranging discussions on this one, and I'll let Carl go first.
Scott, I feel like he set me up for this one.
He didn't talk to me in advance. so
I'm sure. It's Morse code right on the table. So again, the city manager and your staff and I have had these kind of discussions, and so I pulled up one of the specific, broadly what we looked at from all of the respondents that we got. And so when we look at a narrower range at like 40% versus a 50%, what I shared with your staff was that, yeah, 4 of those market peers were at 50%, and one of them was at 25%, and the other ones were somewhere between 35 and 40%, which made the average about 40%. And so there's some outliers in there from what we've seen, and from an evergreen perspective, we've done a lot of work in the state of Texas, and broadly nationally as well. And for whatever reason, salary ranges are kind of regionally dictated. A 50 to 55% range spread in this market is not something that would, it doesn't create shock and awe. Some of those others are a little bit narrower. It is what it is. I think that there's some difference in when organizations are aligning those. There's some differentials in, what those methodologies look like from one organization to another. So we're kind of doing a little bit of isomorphism as we're determining what right looks like. As I shared earlier, there were some respondents that we got that literally provided us the salaries that they are paying their individual employees as well without ranges. And so 2 of those respondents just said, this is what we pay, whatever. It doesn't matter if you've been here for 1 minute or 100 years, you're going to get this salary. And so, again, it's very specific to an organization and what their needs are, what their methodology and philosophy are through compensation. So what I had indicated and pled with your staff was that is not necessarily a thing that we're going to make a recommendation to drastically alter what your range spreads are based on what those market peers are. But what we are looking at is that the reason that they're germane to this conversation, again, is when we're looking at what's that percentage of differential at those specific, at the minimum, at the midpoint, and at the maximum. And then, as looking at it, you go, well, why is it, whatever, 5% or so behind at the minimum, and we're dead even at the maximum? It's just because that range spread needs to be accounted for as we're looking at it, not necessarily saying that this is the right answer and this is the wrong answer, or this is better or this is worse. It's completely defined by what the compensation methodology of the organization is.
So if I heard you right, it's kind of like this is the range spread is the average of all these
Yes, sir.
entities that you polled.
Yes, sir.
But if you were to take maybe entities that were in the range we were in, 50% or higher, we might be closer to their ranges. Would that be a fair statement?
So like the numbers that stick out in my head is that as I pulled, I don't remember even what position, I think it was the accountant position. The respondents that we had, I think there were 8 of them. 4 of them were 50% range spreads. 4 of them were lesser. 1 of them was significantly lesser, which threw the average a little bit low.
Okay.
It just is what it is. I mean, it's not, again, it's nothing that, to be honest with you, I didn't even see it as an issue until it was brought up. And so we had this discussion as well.
Okay. That helps. Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
for explaining. Yeah.
Any other questions? Any questions from anyone here tonight? So my understanding as part of this, in our previous personnel policy, we adopted the 66th percentile is where we wanted to maintain at. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Then tonight, what we're looking at is lowering that to the 50th percentile.
Right. Mathematically true. I do want to point out we're recommending it based on a different market. So we're moving from a 66th percentile of one market to the 50th percentile of a different market, which is somewhat higher. So I don't want to draw the conclusion that it's an apples to apples decrease, but we're recommending 50%, the 50th percentile of the market that you adopted last month.
Okay.
And if I may, and the other thing is that we're bringing up to no less than the 50th percentile, right? So there's positions that already are exceeding that. And so from a broad perspective, and I think I ran an analytic on it which I shared as well with your staff was while we were on a call, was that looking at what those recommended ranges are as we see them kind of going forward, and then juxtaposing that and analyzing that and seeing what that looks like in the current market. Even though we're targeting the 50th percentile, in actuality, I think what it showed up to was closer to the 60th percentile of market. And again, a refined market as well.
And then if we were to approve this resolution tonight, that provides the guidance or the first step in developing the compensation program, and we'll have several opportunities to discuss that before we approve the budget.
Yeah, our intent is we'll take this, we'll devise a recommended implementation plan, and we will bring that back to you next month.
All right. Any other questions from anyone here tonight? Can I get a motion to approve a resolution adopting the 50th percentile as the market price of the city's compensation plan? So moved. Jonathan? And a second? From Dale. Any other discussion from council? With the motion on the table, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. And that will put us back on track, and we'll move on to the first workshop item, which is on the schedule tonight, item 13, which is the fiscal year 2025-26 budget workshop. And we're going to look at the municipal court, capital and strategic projects, and our utility fund. Summer.
Yes, good evening, Council. I'm Summer Fleming, Director of Finance. So tonight marks our third budget workshop with Council on the proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget. And this evening, we will review the proposed budgets for the municipal court, utility fund, and capital and strategic projects. So I'll begin with a brief overview, and then staff will walk through the details of their respective areas. Starting with general fund highlights, the general fund includes property tax revenue at 3.5% increase over the 2024 tax levy, and sales tax increasing 4% over the current year estimate. Proposed operating expenditures are increasing 3.8%, including a 4.5% increase in personnel wages. However, total expenditures, including capital and transfers, are decreasing slightly. The proposed budget includes the continued funding towards the replacement of city vehicles and equipment and maintains the operating reserve at 50% of operating expenditures. There have been a few changes to the budget since the last workshop. TML Intergovernmental Risk Pool announced new rates for fiscal year 25-26, showing that rates for workers' compensation insurance decreased by about 10%, but that is offset with increases in general and auto liability coverages. And then general fund revenue has increased $5,000 for the utility management fee, which is calculated on a percentage of the utilities revenue. But in total, revenues are projected at $10.97 million, and operating expenditures are proposed at $10.25 million. And after transfers and capital outlay, the result is a budgeted surplus of about $264,000. Now, that surplus primarily supports our goal of maintaining a 50% operating reserve. We're also adding almost $63,000 to the unassigned fund balance. And as shown in the 5-year financial plan, this will help position the city to better manage the tax rate in future years, even as costs continue to rise. But with that, I'll turn it over to the Municipal Court Administrator to present the proposed budget for municipal courts.
Good evening, Council. Ricardo Bautista, the Municipal Court Administrator. I'm here to present the Municipal Court proposed budget for fiscal year 2025-2026. So the proposed fiscal year for 2025-2026 is $268,531 and is fully supported by the general fund. This reflects only a 1.6% difference over from last year. Personnel is the largest portion of our budget, 64%. Services covers 29% of our budget, while 7% of supplies and operating costs for the court. Changes to the budget. Personnel costs increased slightly due to salary adjustments. This was partially offset by the reduction in professional services. The court continues to maintain costs responsibly while maintaining essential court operations. The budget highlights. This year's budget includes restricted fund balance usage for specific state authorized purposes. We budgeted $5,500 from the Court Technology Fund. The Technology Fund will be used to support technological upgrades and maintenance. We also allocated $7,000 from the Court Security Fund. Its designated uses to address and enhance court security operations and services discussed by the Court Security Committee. We also have increased $4,000 or added $4,000 from the Local Youth Diversion Fund. That one is intended to use for purposes to start a youth program for the youth of Fair Oaks Ranch. As you can see on the chart, that identifies to you the amounts from the proposed budget as far as from those funds. You can see the beginning and ending balance. The restricted funds are not a part of the general fund. Their use ensures we enhance our operations and services without placing additional strain on the general fund. If you guys have any questions, I'm all ears.
Just out of curiosity, what kind of things does the local youth diversion fund do?
So generally, that actually was passed in January 1st of 2025. That's meant to use for the court to support programs to help the youth, whether to identify, the court and possible education for them to know what not to do, and also to get them involved to identify the court in their day-to-day lives. And so it's really for more educational purposes for the youth of the Fair Oaks Ranch.
Planned?
Yes, we do. We actually are looking into doing a mock trials with the 5th grade classes of the elementary schools. And we're planning to stream it and get them involved and give them key positions in the court, so that way they know.
Is that what most courts do?
No, different courts apply it differently. Sometimes they like to do something for National Night Out. They like to do maybe, like for Halloween, they do scary stuff. Like they bring a beat-up car and they show people, like, this is what happens when you drink and drive or speed and stuff like that. So there's multiple uses you can use it. As far as for us, since we don't have many teenagers in our vicinity, it's better to apply to where we will get most of the youth and we'll be able to reach them better.
Yeah, I ask because I have some friends that have teenagers that could potentially benefit from something like this if it was done right, you know. So I'm just curious. You
No,
know,
we can
and
apply
if
it
you
in
guys ever
multiple.
need any help with it, feel free to
We're open to
reach out.
suggestions. We just want to make sure we start our community outreach as we haven't done in the past, and we really want to start doing that for the Fair Oaks Ranch City.
I'm excited to see it.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Any other questions from anyone here tonight? All right. Thanks, Ricardo.
You're welcome, sir. Have a good day.
All right, so next we'll look at the strategic and capital projects. So staff is proposing 2 new strategic projects for fiscal year 25-26. The first is a facilities master plan budgeted at $100,000. This plan will serve as a long-term roadmap for managing, maintaining, and investing in the city's buildings and infrastructure. It will assess current conditions and identify future needs to ensure facility investments align with the city's goals and mission. The second project is construction of a fence at Fire Station Number 3, budgeted at $36,000. The proposed perimeter fencing around approximately 40,000 square feet of open yard will provide a secure storage space and safe maneuvering of large trucks, trailers, and equipment. And details on this project have been included in the agenda packet. Now, the Strategic Projects Fund is expected to have sufficient remaining fund balance from prior project savings to fully cover the cost of these 2 projects. So if approved, no additional transfer from the general fund would be required. The proposed 25-26 budget includes just over $2 million for the roadway CIP. Now, this funding covers $1.6 million for the second construction increment for Dietz Elkhorn Road reconstruction, $315,000 to begin design work for Rolling Acres Trail reconstruction, and $108,000 to complete remaining engineering for the Ammon Road reconstruction. These projects are funded through the first issuance of the $16 million voter-approved general obligation bond. A second bond issuance is planned for September 2026, and that would support future phases of these roadway improvements. The drainage CIP includes 11 projects with 9 remaining unfunded and totaling approximately $1.6 million over the next 4 years. So for fiscal year 25-26, 2 projects are scheduled, both on Rolling Acres Trail, with a combined cost of nearly $325,000. Now, these projects are planned to be funded through certificates of obligation, with the issuance scheduled next month. So at the July 17 council meeting, I will present for council consideration a resolution authorizing the amount for the notice of sale. This notice informs potential investors about the CO offering and opens the process for receiving competitive bids. So that action will be the final decision point for debt funding the drainage projects, as the notice of sale will lock in the terms and formally initiate the sales process. But that concludes the presentation for the governmental funds. Are there any questions before we look at the proposed budget for the utility?
Anybody else here tonight?
Okay. So like the general fund, I'll start by giving an overview of the proposed utility budget, and then the Director of Public Works and Engineering Services will give a more detailed presentation on budget requests. So the proposed budget reflects an 8% increase in total operating expenditures, including that 4.5% increase in personnel wages. It also provides for utility infrastructure investments, one-time improvements to meet TCEQ requirements, ongoing savings for future capital replacement, and maintains an operating reserve equal to 8 months of expenditures. So utility bills are made up of several components, including a service availability charge, volumetric rates based on usage, and fixed fees for specific purposes that are not tied to usage. And so for next fiscal year, there's no proposed change in the service availability charge or volumetric rates, and those are shown here. but several specific purpose fees will change. The surface water fee, which covers the cost of water distributed by GBRA, will rise from $15.90 per month to $18.50 per month. That's about a $31 annual increase. The TCEQ fee, though minimal, will go up by 1 cent per month, and the debt service fee is estimated to increase 4 cents per month. Now, these fees are recalculated each year based on actual costs and the number of connections on July 1st. And then on the wastewater side, the debt service fee is estimated to decrease 12 cents per month. But in total, operating revenues are projected at $6.24 million, and operating expenses are proposed at $6.09 million, resulting in combined operating income before depreciation totaling a little more than $142,000. Now, separating the divisions, the proposed water utility budget shows an operating income of approximately $239,000 before depreciation, while the wastewater division reflects a $96,000 operating loss. Now, this wastewater loss is largely due to a one-time $100,000 infrastructure rehabilitation expense. So without that cost, wastewater would show a modest $3,600 operating income before depreciation. However, once depreciation is factored in, both utilities report an operating loss. Depreciation is a significant factor due to the utility's substantial investment in property, plant, and equipment, so it provides important insight into how these assets affect long-term financial sustainability. And so this will be a key consideration as the city evaluates the need for rate adjustments in future years to support ongoing infrastructure reinvestment. Now, operating revenues and expenses represent those directly tied to the utility's core services. In contrast, the non-operating revenues and expenses relate to activities outside of the day-to-day operations. So non-operating revenues include impact fees, which are legally restricted and cannot be used for operating or maintaining existing infrastructure. Capital reserve fees, which are set by ordinance to cash fund capital projects. Debt service fees, which are restricted by bond covenants for repaying utility debt, and interest earnings. And then non-operating expenses include debt service interest expense, interfund transfers, and a proposed capital contribution next year for a GBRA water line. The capital contribution will help fund infrastructure to enable future receipt and distribution of purchased water directly to the northeast portion of the city. But when combining the non-operating activities totaling $1.27 million with the $678,000 operating loss, the result is a net increase of nearly $589,000 to the utility's net position. Now, net position represents the utility's financial standing at a given point in time. It's the difference between the utility's total assets and liabilities. And the largest portion of that is invested in capital assets, net of any debt used to acquire those assets. The remaining components are dedicated for specific uses, including the water and wastewater capital funds, the equipment replacement fund, the operating reserve, and that debt service reserve. So with this budget, the operating reserve grows to over $4 million, which is equal to about 8 months of operating expenses. But are there any questions on the overview before Grant takes us into a more detailed look at the proposed water and wastewater budgets?
Questions? Okay. Thanks, Summer.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Grant Watanabe, the Public Works Director for the city, and I'll be presenting the proposed utility budget for fiscal year 2025-2026. So although part of the same enterprise fund, we do budget for and track expenses for water and wastewater separately. Looking at the pie chart to the left, you can see the proposed budget for the water utility is $4,232,709. The biggest component of this budget is the GBRA water reservation fee, which makes up about 42% of that. And that's because over 60% of the water that we distribute to our customers is purchased from GBRA. That's followed by personnel at 25%, maintenance and operations at 25%, and services at 8%. Now, looking at the pie chart to the right, we can see the proposed budget for the wastewater utility at $1,863,519. And there, the biggest component is personnel at 58%, followed by maintenance and operations at 38%, and services at 4%. This chart shows a comparison between the proposed budget and the current year adopted budget. There's slight increases in personnel, maintenance and operations, and services, and the biggest increase is for the GBRA water reservation fee, which I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. Overall, the proposed budget is a 8.1% increase over the current year. Moving on to a few highlights from the water budget. The first is an increase of $30,000 for the maintenance of plant and lines to bring the budget in line with prior year actual costs. Back in fiscal year 23, we spent $144,000 on maintenance of plant and lines. In fiscal year 24, we spent about $197,000 on plant and lines, and in this current year, we're projected to spend about $150,000 on the maintenance of plant and lines. So the addition of $30,000 for next year's budget brings us up to $150,000, which is what we're projected to hit this year. The second item is the addition of $208,000 for increased GBRA water reservation fees, and this is based on preliminary rates that we received from GBRA last week. Their increase is driven by increased maintenance and operation costs for the Canyon Lake facility, and this includes the treatment and disposal costs, the zebra mussel mitigation, pump and pipeline repair, and some other communication upgrades. Now, this is a big jump compared to previous years, and in discussion with their Deputy Chief Financial Officer, while some of this may be one time, the majority of this increase will be ongoing. And she explained that their water treatment plant is over 20 years old, and a lot of their equipment is coming up for major maintenance or overhaul. The third item is the increase of $20,000 for additional tank repairs not covered by our tank maintenance contract. So this year was the first year of our 10-year tank maintenance contract, which covers inspection, cleaning, maintenance, and coating both the interior and exterior of their tanks. But it does not include latent defects, which are defects that can't be observed from the outside of the tank. And during the rehab of the Emil Davis Tank 2, which is the tank that was done this year, about $20,000 of structural deficiencies were identified inside the tank that had to be addressed. So as we move forward with rehabbing the next tank, we're expecting something similar, since all of these tanks have not been rehabbed or recoated for quite some time.
Hey, Grant?
Yes, sir.
What's the age spread on our tanks? Are some way older, therefore you can expect more latent defects as we go through this?
Steve might know a better answer. I know a lot of these tanks were last coated 15, 20 years ago, and it kind of varies from there.
So we can look for expenditures probably going up on those. Sorry, Steve.
Good evening, Stephen Freed with City of Fair Oaks Ranch, Assistant Director of Public Works. So most of our tanks were built in the late 70s. So the newest tank we have is Water Plant 5. It was roughly 2006, that tank. So we wouldn't expect latent damages on a tank that age, but some of these older ones in the 70s, yes.
And the last highlight from the water budget is an increase of $14,222 for the rental of a restroom trailer. This represents about 25% of the total cost of that rental.
Grant, are all these costs that you've listed out here, are they already included in the budget for your water at $4.2 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, Grant, the GBRA, you said you got that rate, that increase last week. What were we expecting from them? Is this significantly more than we expected?
The past increase have been in the range of 5% to 8%. And for this upcoming year, it was a lot higher than that.
What percent is this roughly?
You remember, Summer?
We'll calculate that for you.
Okay.
So while they're calculating that, the rate increase that Grant's referring to is their O&M rate. We pay 3 or 4 different fees to GBR. We have of course, our reservation fee and our use fee, which is the water itself, the O&M charge, which is this, and there might be one more that all goes into that composite GBRA increase, and this particular portion is on the O&M part of their overall fee.
When we start accessing our reservation, does our O&M go up with it when we start drawing down on those waters that are reserved, or is that just kind of comes to us no matter whether we're using the reservation or not? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, O&M is based on every 1,000 gallons of water that you take from GBRA.
Okay.
There's a separate fee for the overall reservation of our total contract amount that changed a smaller amount than the maintenance and operation rate did.
So as we draw down more, our O&M rate will probably increase accordingly. Okay. Just wanted to understand it.
Yes, sir. All right, moving on to wastewater. There's slight increases in personnel and services with a slightly larger increase for maintenance and operations, which I'll cover on the next slide. Overall, the proposed budget is a 7.5% increase from the current year. These are just the 3 items that I do want to highlight. The first is an increase of $100,000 for critical manhole rehabilitation. TCEQ requires that all sewer mains and manholes over the Edwards Aquifer recharge zone be inspected, tested, and repaired every 5 years. And this is to prevent potential contamination of the aquifer. Staff did conduct the inspection and testing last year and identified a total of 31 manholes that require some degree of repair, some requiring more minor repair and some requiring major repair. The estimated cost for that is $100,000, and this is a one-time until we re-inspect and retest these manholes 5 years from now. The second is an increase of $7,000 for clarifier and CLR maintenance. CLR is our continuous loop reactor, otherwise known as our oxidation ditch over at the waste plant. And the last item is an increase of $14,000 for the rental of the restroom trailer, and again, this represents 25% of the total cost.
Grant, what was the restroom trailer for?
Staff has outgrown the restroom facilities in the maintenance barn. The plan is to lease a trailer and have it hooked up adjacent to the maintenance barn so that all staff can use it and be shared between not only water and wastewater, but also maintenance as well.
Is that why the fee was in both budgets?
That's correct. It's a shared cost.
I know you may have answered this last week, last meeting. I think we asked a question on it, but about building a restroom versus renting. What's the reason for renting? Each year, if we're going to spend $28,444 a year.
The lease trailer is intended to be a temporary solution while we work through the facilities master plan process to develop a permanent solution.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you for reminding me what that was.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. There's several items identified in the budget for capital and equipment requests. The first is the replacement of water plant flow meters. These flow meters measure the water, accurately measure the water coming in and going out of our water plants. The 2 at Plant 5 and 2 at Elmo Davis are at the end of their service life, and the intent here is to replace those 4 meters. The second request is to replace firewalls and cell modems for our SCADA system. Those are also at the end of service life. The third request is replacement of up to 3 well pumps. Well pumps do have a service life of about 10 to 15 years, and several, usually about 2 to 3, require replacement each year, and that's what we're budgeting for here. The fourth item is a request for installation of lift station auto dialers. Auto dialers were purchased as part of the current year budget. However, that was not enough funds for the installation, and we're budgeting for the installation next year at a cost of $32,000. Auto dialers provide a backup means of communication if our SCADA system goes down, so that our operators are able to receive those alerts or alarms and respond to issues at the lift stations. And then lastly, we have a request to replace our mini excavator for $62,000, and that's being funded entirely by the equipment replacement fund. All right. So for fiscal year 2026, the budget includes funding for a total of 5 projects. 3 of those projects are existing, and there are 2 new projects. The first existing project is the elevated storage tank, which we recently closed on 3 acres of property up north to the north side of the city. The redesign for the new location will be initiated soon and in parallel with annexation and zoning of that property. But we do expect to go into construction sometime in fiscal year 26. The second existing project is the upgrade electrical at Plant 3 pump station. Plant 3 is the last pump station that is not on variable frequency drives or VFDs. That design is completed, and we're budgeting to start construction next fiscal year. And the third existing project is the SAWS Emergency Interconnect. This was originally planned for the intersection of Fair Oaks Parkway and IH-10. During the design phase, we learned that the SAWS water main in that location is encased in steel, so we're having to slightly relocate the location of this interconnect. It's now being planned for the intersection of Leslie Pfeiffer Road and IH-10. The cost might be slightly higher at that location. We're going through that process right now. But right now, we're asking to budget for $170,000 for construction. And again, that as we go through that design process, that might change. There are also 2 new projects, specifically the Deeds Elkhorn water line and the GBRA water line. I do have some slides on those projects, but I know you've seen them before, so unless you have any questions on those 2 projects, I plan to skip them. Here's the Deeds Elkhorn Road water line again, and then the GBRA water main extension. Okay. Moving on to wastewater CIP projects, there are 2. One is an existing project and one is a new project. Our existing project is the wastewater treatment plant phase 1 expansion. Right now, we're in the 75% design stage. We do plan to reach 100% design by August and bid this project for construction shortly into the new fiscal year. The new project is the install sewer line and decommissioning of the Falls lift station. This lift station is in poor condition and also located in floodplain. So not only is it difficult to access during rain events, but some of the electrical components have been damaged by debris that's flowed through that lift station in the past. The plan here is to start design in next fiscal year, in fiscal year 26, and then hopefully get to construction the following fiscal year in 27. And that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
I thought it was a good rundown. Thanks, Grant. Anybody else? Questions?
Grant, our well pumps, do we ever have any remand, or do we just replace them every time?
Yeah, we just replace them.
Are they units that could be remand? No?
Steve says no.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone here tonight? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
I do have an answer to the one question on the GBRA. So the proposed budget is 13% higher than what our projected costs are for this fiscal year. So it's a 13% increase. And that does conclude our workshop. I just wanted to follow up. I added a slide. It should be in front of you that I put up there before the meeting. So as an update in the budget process, I mentioned on July 17, the next meeting, I'll present for council consideration a resolution authorizing the final amount for the notice of sale of COs. That notice will post on July 23rd and be open for the competitive bidding market. At the August 7 meeting, I'll present the calculated tax rates based on certified values and a resolution setting the maximum tax rate council will consider, and we'll set a date for the public hearing. This will be the last workshop prior to the city manager filing the proposed budget with the city secretary. Also at that same meeting, council will receive bids for the sale of COs and adopt an ordinance authorizing the sale to the lowest bidder. And this timeline ensures that funds are in place for the new fiscal year. And then on August 18, the city manager will file the proposed budget with the city secretary's office, and the public hearing on the proposed budget and tax rate will be held at a special meeting in September. So we are still on track to approve the budget and tax rate ordinances at the regularly scheduled meeting on September 18. And that's all I have.
Anything else? Any other questions? Thanks, Summer.
All right, thank you.
And with that, we'll move on to our last workshop item tonight, which is the Flock Safety Automated License Plate Reader. And Chief.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Council, neighbors here tonight and watching at home. I'm Todd Smith, your Chief of Police. Tonight, I wanted to give a brief overview and status update to our Flock Safety Automated License Plate Reader scheduled to go live next month. Currently, we have 7 cameras installed, and while they are operational, we've been testing them to ensure they are working properly and training our staff on the new policy and procedures that are important to any new program. First, I'd like to explain what they are. ALPR stands for Automated License Plate Reader, and they are cameras primarily used by law enforcement and communities to enhance public safety. These cameras take a photo of the rear of a vehicle and a close-up image of the license plate. The technology can read the license plates and extract other vehicle details such as make, model, and color. When a vehicle is listed on a hot list, which could mean a missing person, stolen vehicle, or vehicle known to be connected to a wanted person, when one passes by a camera, the system can alert law enforcement so we can be aware very quickly. We can also search the database for vehicles based on either the plate numbers, vehicle characteristics, or other identifying information. So why Flock Safety cameras? These cameras are used by thousands of other cities, and we feel they can enhance our efforts to solve crimes, bring justice to our victims, accountability to our offenders, and locate missing persons. They also offer a deterrence just by their mere presence in many communities. An example I've used here is when one of our vulnerable community members is missing and believed to be driving a silver Honda Civic. We can simply enter the description in the system and start searching for them. The system would notify us of any similar cars in the area, potentially leading to a safe and timely return of our resident. I think it's important to emphasize what these cameras will not be used for. They will not be used for traffic enforcement, citations, immigration enforcement, or monitoring driving behavior. These cameras are not equipped with facial recognition capabilities, nor can they detect people, gender, or race. And the data collected will never be sold or used for any commercial purposes. These cameras were initially requested during the June 6, 2024 regular City Council meeting. They were approved during the FY 24-25 budget process. $34,050 was allocated for the first year costs, which includes installation of 9 cameras, and future annual costs are anticipated to be $27,000. Next, I wanted to show you where the cameras are installed. 9 cameras were approved to be installed inside the city limits to include the ingress and egress points in the city, as well as the intersection of Dietz Elkhorn and Fair Oaks Parkway. 2 cameras will be installed in the TxDOT right-of-way on Ralph Fair Road once agreements with TxDOT have been signed. Next, I've included some cities most of us are familiar with that use the Flock system, and there are numerous school districts, businesses, and neighborhoods that currently use them. So where are we now? As mentioned, we are in the testing phase to ensure the accuracy of the transparency portal and to further define roles and responsibilities for our patrol officers and criminal investigation team. We will become operational only after we complete a thorough testing and formally adopt clear policies governing their use. Our goal is to go live next month, as mentioned in August. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to touch on some highlights of the policy you have in your folder. First, I wanted to speak about the use and access. I want to emphasize that this tool is to be used for law enforcement purposes only. This includes criminal investigations, locating a missing or endangered person, locating a lost or stolen vehicle, and in the apprehension of wanted persons. Officers will only have access to the alerts, not the search feature. Searches will only be conducted by the lieutenant and our investigative team, and only when necessary. Next is the management of the access. The lieutenant will be responsible for maintaining a list of all authorized users, developing training requirements, and reporting any security concerns to me, the chief of police. The CID, or our Criminal Investigations Division Sergeant, will be responsible for ensuring proper collection and retention of the data, and the data obtained as evidence will be stored appropriately. And under data sharing, which I think it's important to note that information sharing is a normal practice for solving crimes and other law enforcement purposes, but permission for this is not automatically granted. Agencies will have to ask permission and have a valid business need to be granted permission to our flock camera data. Regarding retention and audits, the data will be kept for 30 days unless it has become evidence in a criminal case. Audits will be conducted monthly by the lieutenant to ensure compliance with our policy, and any sign of misuse will be addressed in accordance with our department's disciplinary action policy. To close, I wanted to emphasize that only authorized Fair Oaks Ranch police personnel will have access to this system, and all access will be logged and audited to ensure proper use. The captured data will be securely stored for 30 days unless it is part of an active investigation. And the public transparency portal can show how many vehicles have passed by the camera in the last 30 days, how many hot list hits were received, and the number of searches we've conducted. It is fully customizable, and we're evaluating which data points will be most valuable for our residents. I also want to mention we have a 1-year contract, and we'll do a cost-benefit analysis at the end to determine its success at the end of the year. Thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Chief, is 1 year enough time?
I think hopefully we'll have some wins. Hopefully we'll be able to solve some crimes. Hopefully we'll be able to show a reduction from the time that they're installed. So I think that we could have some valuable data. And certainly if one of our residents goes missing, that would be a huge win, and certainly a cost benefit.
Thank you.
But even then, I mean, coming back and presenting what the analysis is, we can make a determination to maybe do another year.
Absolutely.
Or we could just say it's not what we thought it was going to be. And,
Sure.
I have a few questions.
Yes, sir.
So when we first talked about this, the hot list was what came to mind, where stolen vehicle, missing vehicle, it pings going somewhere, you can try to locate it.
Sure.
What I'd never really thought of is the second bullet point, where law enforcement can search databases for vehicles based on license plates, vehicle characteristics, or other identifying information. What's other identifying information?
So I think it's been best characterized as bumper stickers.
Okay.
So there's certain bumpers of, say, a white sedan that would, some people have 7 bumper stickers, some would have 3. And I think that identifying information, we could put in something about those bumper stickers, which would then be added and elicit a faster hit.
Is that a search for that type of information? Is that based on a complaint from a resident, or does it have to rise the threshold of like reasonable suspicion or something like that?
I think if we have a suspect information and somebody only has maybe 3 digits of a license plate, a lot of times crimes are solved because not only is it a white sedan, but it has specific identifiable bumper stickers. which can lead investigators to be able to at least ask some questions. That doesn't mean that whoever's driving that car gets arrested, but it certainly would lead us in the right direction to be able to ask those questions.
But this would only be done during an active investigation.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, so in the scenario that I was thinking of, which I was gonna ask about, was like if a resident calls in and says, hey, there was a road rage incident, I was being tailgated, somebody flashed a gun, black truck, they took a ride on Fair Oaks Parkway, then does that warrant the police going in and searching how many black trucks just passed these, and let's go knock on all these doors?
No, we would have to have more, we would certainly have to establish more reasonable suspicion. And again, we don't want to just rely on the hits that come across. We want our officers to actually do search in TCIC to see if that car is wanted, to see, by running a license plate, we can find out where that person lives. And oftentimes we're able to make a phone call and determine that person wasn't even in our area. So it would just help us eliminate. But again, we don't want, just because a hit goes off, from my experience, you get the same tone on the radio for a stolen license plate as you would for a stolen car. And so it's important for the officers to be able to recognize that, and before we just start stopping people because of these flock hits, that we're also running them through multiple systems to determine, to make sure that it's an accurate, that we have accurate information.
One of the points was the data collector will never be sold or used for any commercial purposes. That includes Flock, the company itself?
Yes.
Like they will not do that?
Correct.
Okay. The renewal, will that come to us, or will we not, like, who decides? I know there's gonna be a cost-benefit analysis, I have a question on that, but when it comes to the renewal period, who makes the decision whether or not we're gonna renew? Are we gonna decide that, or does the police decide that, or
I think
city manager?
I look at it as we're a team. And any time we're reporting out on crime, a cost-benefit analysis when it comes to Flock and something we're spending money on should be shared.
And have y'all determined sort of what's gonna go in, what type of analysis is gonna be done?
No, we're still in the stages to try to secure the policy, make sure it has everything that it needs to have in it.
Okay. On the map, why 3 cameras on Ammon Road? I just found that peculiar. Because I would figure one would cover the ingress and egress.
I see 2. Well, let's see, there's the other one, Rolling Acres. So we have Rolling Acres and then Ralph Faradam. So that Ralph Faradam, that's going to be the main thoroughfare
Is that
with
one on-
TxDOT.
That one's actually on Ralph Fair.
Oh, I'm
correct?
sorry.
The top right,
Yes.
the one, that's not on Ammon Road, it's actually on Ralph Fair Road, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
at Ammon.
So there's 2 on Ammon, one at Rolling Acres and one at the northernmost 90-degree turn.
Yeah, so I saw it as the northernmost 90-degree turn, the southernmost 90-degree turn, and then again at the intersection of Ammon and Ralph Fair. And so is it just the way they're positioned? It just seems like a third of our cameras are on like one road.
Yeah, I think we want to make sure that the ingress and egress were covered both directions. But to be honest, I wasn't part of the discussion to decide exactly where the locations were going to be.
So and correct me if I'm wrong, but the one that, and they're not numbered, I can't see numbers on them, but the one that looks like it's at the intersection of Ammon and Ralph Fair Road is actually on Ralph Fair Road. It's collecting data after
Only
you
from
pass
Ralph Fair.
Ammon.
Okay.
And so the other 2 would be for people traveling west on Ammon Road that would come in, and we capture them probably just prior to Rolling Acres. And the other one would be for people coming from the Kendall County portion and down south.
I don't know if you can read it, but it says where the pet resort is. So
Yeah.
that's gonna be just past Post Oak.
Are these movable at some point, or are they?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean,
Okay.
it's part of the contract. They go where we say they go.
And then I think this is the last question. Several similar cities that you list, has there been any sort of collaboration with them, like Bernie, Bulverde, Castle Hills, et cetera? Has there been any collaboration with them in terms of their policies and the efficacy of their program, and whether or not they've had to make changes along the way, and whether we would want to incorporate that rather than go through those growing pains, if there are any?
Sure. No, I've got a great relationship with Chief Pettis and Bernie, and so we've had a lot of discussions, and he looks at it as this is a very valuable tool, but at the same time, it's completely customizable. So what Bernie may value, we may find a different value for us here, but I think it's important to have those meetings and discussions just to be able to cherry pick and figure out exactly what's going to serve us the best.
Okay. And then I swear this is the last question. The formal policy, do we adopt that, or is that internal? Like, is that what the staff adopts that policy, or does it come to us?
I believe it's internal, but it's there for your review if you have suggestions or concerns.
Okay. I'll yield the floor.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So on a scale from 1 to 10, with like 1 being a rubber duck and 10 being your patrol car, right? How useful do you think this is to policing activities in Fair Oaks?
Well, it's my understanding that these discussions around this system came right after a rash of car burglaries. So at that time, it would have been really nice to be able to pinpoint. So it's one of those, hindsight's 20/20, and I would think that if anyone had a loved one go missing, and knew that this technology was around, we would be remiss to at least give it a try. Because if you had a loved one go missing, you would want every piece of technology out there looking for them to help determine their last direction of travel and hopefully to be able to return them home safely. So I think of that as being more kind of like the highlight and best service we can give our residents. And at the same time, if there is a burglary or a rash of crimes, we'll have a leg up. We'll at least have some options of people to be able to go talk to. That being said, if we could get our residents to lock their doors on their cars, that would help even more than having a flock system. But I'm just telling you, every time there's a rash, I've yet to have a window actually broken on a car. So we get cars broken into, not regularly, but at the same time when they do, there's 3 or 4, and it's because people are walking down the road and checking door handles, and lo and behold, the cars are open and there's guns hidden under the seat.
How quickly, so back to his use case scenario here where there's a man driving around with a gun, right? Then you're saying that you would need more evidence before you can use this, before you can submit the search or query or however you do it. Well, let's say I call and say, hey, my daughter's 14, she's in this car. How many steps between those cameras and my phone call are there? And why would it be any different between his phone call and those cameras? And is it?
Yeah, so it's case by case, but we could have a situation recently, I think it was last night, maybe the night before, there was a business in Bernie that was victim of an aggravated robbery. And so as soon as they put out a hot call, we can make sure that that's entered and be on the alert. As soon as we get an alert, we're rolling. Much different if it's a much older call as follow-up of an investigation, potential suspect in a crime from weeks ago or something like that. But we would certainly do our best to pull over the car as soon as possible. But at the same time, we've only got, 12 square miles here. By the time we get an alert and get 3 officers behind the car, more than likely they're going to be outside of our jurisdiction. But we can certainly radio ahead to our partner agencies to help throw that net out as fast as possible. So I think it just depends on how, it's going to be up to the officer that takes the call. Because in your situation, and you can name other situations, an officer on scene is going to be putting it out on the radio, and they'll do a general broadcast in all surrounding counties, be on the lookout for. So not only would be looking for flock alerts, but just that information itself would escalate all hands on deck to be on the lookout.
So the phone call would activate all of the flock searches, right?
Yes.
So the investigation would start there.
We'd have to make sure that it's entered, but it's one of those things that.
Now, what if I call and it's 2 a.m. and I say, hey, I'm fairly certain this guy's drunk, right? He's all over the road, you know, because I have made that call before at 2 a.m.
Sure,
So
sure.
I'm just curious here.
So I think in certain cases, the dispatch putting out a general broadcast is going to be much quicker than us waiting to enter it into Flock.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
trying to catch
absolutely.
somebody. So the alert
Yeah.
is
It's second, but I'm just curious as to when does it actually kick into effect? Like when does it start recording data instead of just observing data, right?
So it's always recording data and it's keeping the data for 30 days.
Right, I understand, but.
So we could go
when-
back.
When
could
are we
even go
using
back.
the data is I guess, I'm trying to figure, you know, I wasn't here a year ago when this got, you know, so maybe I've missed the chance to ask some of these questions, but I'm curious about it now as to why it's here and how much we're gonna use it. And I understand staying ahead of the problem. I'm with you there, and I've talked with you in detail about, you know, Lemon Creek's gonna be nice and new when it's built, you know, but what's it gonna look like 30 years from now? We don't know. You
Sure.
know, I'm sure it might stay up, it might not, you know. I mean, we might end up needing something like this or wishing that we had something like this, you know, as a deterrent. So I understand and I appreciate the presentation, but I'm just curious and there's no way to really know how much you're gonna use it, and hopefully you never use it, right? Hopefully it just.
Ideally.
Where nothing ever goes wrong here and no cars are stolen, nobody drives off and.
Well, and the same type of, you know, if there's a heinous crime, our investigators as well as Texas Rangers, you know, for instance, a murder, like we'd be canvassing neighborhoods and getting all the Ring doorbell footage that we could.
Sure.
And we would be getting all of the text tag photos of anybody that went through the toll roads. We'd be looking for any direction of travel. If they went into a private parking lot in a shopping center, we'd be getting all of that surveillance footage. And it's amazing how the lack of intrusion that the Flock system is compared to all the other cameras that are out there that we drive by.
Or your iPhone in general.
Yes,
right?
exactly. So this is just really a small tool, but I think it could be invaluable for us to get a leg up on some things and at least be able to start in the right direction when we're trying to investigate a crime.
And the way I understood it, when you and I talked about it last, it buys us into this network, right? Let's say my
Yes.
truck is stolen, and I call up and say, hey, my truck's stolen, you guys look for it. Then now, as, you know, having suffered that loss, I now have access to a police force that can use the Flock system to see where exactly it went all over America that Flock may be.
That is correct.
And it'll just follow it along the way. There's very, you know, from the cities that you listed, there's very few major artery cities that it could go through and not probably pick up a Flock camera if everybody's putting them along the main road. And without having them, you don't get that, right? Like if.
That is true.
Yeah, so you can't do a search unless you own the Flock for your city.
It's not attached to our Google.
Yeah.
So having a relationship with Flock and all of that information would be nice.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Chief, and not really a question, but more of an observation. I see this system as a force multiplier for you guys.
Sure.
And I was on council when we went through the spate of car burglaries, and it would have been nice to have had back then. But again, just handled right, it's another tool in your arsenal of what we can do should you need it, kind of thing. And hopefully you never need it. And but you're right. I mean, you would be. It's certainly more intrusive than running around and collecting everybody's doorbell camera footage
Sure.
and stuff. This is only reading the car and the tag and the description of the car.
It's just the license plate, it's just the rear of the car. We don't have a real-time crime center, so it's not like we have any personnel that are in a room full of traffic cameras that are being monitored. And so many times this is just going to be after the fact and help find investigative leads.
And CID may get a hit on his truck in Chavano Park at a certain time.
Correct.
All right, okay. I think it's a good investment.
Who I guess compiles. I did. Well, because Jonathan,
You've used yours up.
the hot list. Who compiles the hot list?
So the hot list is generated, again, it's fully customizable. And so we can go in and decide what we want to be alerted on.
So like
Hold on a second. So when you go through and we get a stolen vehicle,
Yes.
and you go through and put it into we don't go into Flock and enter the stolen vehicle into the flock database. Isn't that database tied to the law enforcement database? So it
Yes.
will, so that's the key, is that as you're doing an investigation and you're looking for a vehicle, somehow it gets entered into your normal procedures for law enforcement.
Yeah, it'll be in the TCIC, which is Texas, and the NCIC, which is national, if it's stolen anywhere in the country.
And somehow that crosses over and Flock pulls that information.
It would be entered into Flock by the reporting agency, wherever they are.
So we actually have to go into Flock and enter this information.
If it's stolen from our jurisdiction. Otherwise, it's going to be there from other jurisdictions. As soon as a report is taken
I'm not
up,
sure about
up in
that.
Dallas, the Dallas police officer will enter the car as stolen. The dispatch center will enter it in TCIC and NCIC. And those, if you have the alert set for stolen vehicles on Flock for NCIC and TCIC, is when you'll get those alerts.
Right.
So for instance, we've thought about unchecking a box recently because in looking at the data, we've had many hits that have come from a protective order. So you've got a subject that has a protective order against him, but the protectee doesn't even live in our area. So for the protected, the one that has the protective order, every time he drives up a road to go to work and back, he may pass through 3 cameras each way. So next thing you know, we have 6 hits a day. And so we're having to look at that and evaluate, do we want to be alerted for something that has nothing to do.
But I think the
with-
key piece is we're not entering a stolen vehicle into Flock. It's
Correct.
pulling that information from
It automatically
TCIC
goes.
or NCIC.
Automatically goes in.
Yeah, because that was my question, was when we had that rash, and I would say, maybe you would agree with me, that most crimes, at least that they're coming here from San Antonio.
Correct.
And they're probably in a stolen vehicle or a stolen license plate.
Correct.
So if a vehicle is stolen in San Antonio, or the plate's stolen in San Antonio, and they're not on Flock, but that vehicle is reported to SAPD, it goes into the law enforcement system, gets pulled into Flock.
Yes.
They come into our city to come steal cars in a stolen vehicle. You get a hit, you get alerted.
Yes, we'll be alerted.
And so you can potentially respond before a crime is committed.
Yes.
Okay.
We could see that it's northbound on whatever road, and we could head north of that, at least surround the area, at least start actively patrolling those neighborhoods, and hopefully not only catch whoever's doing this, but also prevent it just by our presence.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I asked you this last time, but I just want to ask it again so that it's heard. Let's say that we have Bear County puts out, hey, this guy's taking a shot at a police car, got a pistol, he's headed up wherever, right, towards Fair Oaks. And we get notified that the Flock picks him up, coming through our cameras, right? We're under no obligation to go stop him, right? We just have to notify the agency that put out the search, right?
Well, we would do our best. If, you've got an active felon like that that's headed through our jurisdiction, we do our best to try to apprehend them. And at the same time,
Or
we're not.
assist.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. But that's something with the radio. We're on the same radio channel as Kendall County and Bernie. And so that would be a team effort to
Right.
make sure we've got several officers headed to the area to assist.
So. But it's not putting any pressure on any one man that's closest to it to do something on his own.
Correct,
right?
and that's part of our policies and procedures and training, is that I don't want any felony stops without at least 3 officers present.
Sure.
So we don't want one officer to have some alert at 2 a.m. and go try to, perform a felony traffic stop
Right.
by himself.
Okay.
But he could certainly call from help from other areas.
Anybody else? Any questions from anyone here tonight? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And I believe that covers all the items that we had on the agenda for tonight. Is there any council members that have any announcements that they would like to make?
I have one.
Good.
I just want to recognize my 2 grandsons, Caden Roden and Maddox Roden, who
attending the meeting tonight rather than staying home and playing,
You
2K2,
paid him, Keith.
Xbox.
To be here.
Good deal. Thank y'all for coming. Did you learn anything? That's good. All right, anybody else? I have two announcements. Tomorrow's July 4th. It is the 249th anniversary of our nation's independence. And it sounds like we got a pretty good rain tonight, so it ought to cut the grounds for fireworks tomorrow. But again, this year, the City of Fair Oaks Ranch is partnering with the Fair Oaks Ranch Country Club to put it on a very similar demonstration that we've done the last 2 or 3 years. The gates will open at 6 p.m. at the Country Club tomorrow night. You can go out and gain your spot. And fireworks will start somewhere around 9 o'clock or when it gets dark. And in between there'll be a DJ, live music, food trucks, plenty to do while we wait for the fireworks to begin. But it's open to all Fair Oaks Ranch residents. You do not have to be a country club member to attend. All Fair Oaks Ranch residents and their guests are invited to attend. We do expect a pretty good turnout, even because this one's on a Friday night, so hopefully a lot of people come out to watch the fireworks. Fireworks and laser show. And last announcement I had is we are still accepting applications to serve on the city's boards, committees, and commissions. Those applications are due by August 1st. And if you do have a question on submitting an application, please contact the city's secretary's office, and they will help you through with whatever questions that you have. Scott, anything else?
Nothing tonight.
For council, are there any council members, do you have anything that you would like added to a future agenda?
Got a question, Mayor. Do you have a count on the occupancy of the committees that we're seeking new members for? Like, do we have enough volunteers
They're
to fill them
finishing it
all?
up right now.
Okay, so we'll know maybe by next council meeting.
What they've done, the city secretary office is going right now and contacting all those that are due to be reappointed, and if they want to be reappointed, and that'll determine the number of vacancies. But it'll also come back to us to reappoint those individuals, and then we'll have an opportunity to fill the vacancies. I believe right now they've had 4 applicants, so we're kind of in the middle of the process. All right. Additions to future council meetings, anything? All right. Christine, anything I missed? Anything else we need to cover?
No, sir.
Scott, from your point? Or?
No, sir.
Christine, I have the time now is 8:55 and we are adjourned.